Okay, welcome everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time today to join us. This is a really fun workshop that we've been planning now for quite some time. We're really excited to be partnering with Tracey Brant and really excited that this partnership can really hopefully give you some information, some key resources, some new perspectives, and hopefully help you with what you're dealing with. So Tracey, right now, how long have you been at Cornell? 24 years, left for a little bit and came back and so on. So right now she's a Kessler Fellows Program Director. We're really excited that we're partnering with them. So just a few logistics for today. There's a lot of remote viewers, probably more than what our regular online audience is. So Amy is at the controls. She's our program coordinator for Work Life, and she's going to be addressing any questions that come in through the chat feature. There will be time for questions and answers, so feel free to do that. There is a handout that just gives you a little bit of an outline today, as well as the resources. And then I wanted to remind you that there's a well-being wheel that's out there online. One of our primary focuses with the Work-Life Office is to make sure that we provide resources and support and so on for balancing work and life. So each of these wheels are live and they have clicks to lots of different Cornell resources. So feel free to share that and let us know if you have questions about that. Restrooms are right out the hallway there. There are a couple people that need to leave at 12:30. That's fine. And this is a lunch and learn, so feel free to munch while you're learning today. Okay? Any questions before we get started? Okay, we're ready to roll. It's all yours, Tracey. She'll introduce herself. Yep. You can be taught.
Thank you. I can be taught, but I don't know how well it's going to work. I'm going to give it a go. Hi. Let's see. So, hi. Is this good? So I think if you addressed a letter to Tracey Brant, Land of the Unknown, it would find me wherever I am. I'm really comfortable there. It seems to be a place that keeps calling me throughout my 57 years. My past 11 years has gone like this. My father died on New Year's Day in 2007, after which I decided to leave Cornell, buy a camper, pack my dogs up, and live next to a kennel that was owned by a woman I met online. So at 5 a.m. I would get up and work in the kennel, and then I would walk my dogs, and then I would go spend the day at the Cummings Veterinary College. At the end of the day, I would go back, work in the kennel, walk my dogs, and do homework. So I left Cornell, I lived in a camper in a kennel, and I completed my master's degree at the age of 45. Clearly, I needed a break. After which I came back, which is a good thing because my house and my husband are here. And over the next 10 years, I've had an amazing job at Cornell, another in a long line. And I've done a lot of wonderful things, including a trip to New Zealand for my 50th birthday, where I have to admit I nearly died, but that's a whole different story. I've met and studied with great people, had a lot of accomplishments like we all have, and I've discovered a lot about myself as my life has unraveled and as I've sewn it back up. Also during that 10 years, and I know you can relate, my mother, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my brother-in-law have all passed away. 3 dogs have died. I took a bus alone to New York City to have a total knee replacement. I do not recommend that as a path. Friends, children, and partners have passed away, accidents, illnesses, overdoses, suicides. There have been miscarriages and terminations. Elderly have moved from their homes into facilities, job losses, divorces, every disappearance you could name. I've studied grief and loss, and I find those conversations a place where I feel very at home. So basically, I'm a lot of fun, and I have a packed social life, as you can imagine. Usually when I share that part of my life, the reaction I get with people is, wow, I can't imagine. But I think you can. I think everybody here can. And I think everyone should, because someday those things will happen to all of us. Not those same things, but your things. So that I am standing here and that you are sitting here having experienced all the things we have experienced seems like a miracle to me. And to get here, we have all released and received over and over and over again. It's been excruciating, mystical, overwhelming, joyful. It's a good place. This is my place, and I'm really happy to be standing in it. So today, what's important, oh, these are not working. Here, these are not working. Okay, so that's the slide 2. That's slide 2. That's slide 3. Okay, and slide 4. So today, I'm able to stand here and declare to you, really claim my conversation, which is an area that I work within, claiming your conversation, that I'm a practitioner of the painful, the purposeful, and the altogether possible, and you are too. By the way, there's not a lot of people hiring for that job description, just in case you're wondering. But I know your pain, and you know mine. Even though we're different, we are not separate, and that's a really important distinction. We're each of the flow of life, this cyclical, generative, forward-moving, co-creative impulse of the universe. Times of fertilization, birth, growth, maturation, blooming, times of lightness and expanse, and times of withdrawal, decrease, death, the times of darkness and contraction while the cycle is preparing to begin again. Just think of all the cycles we have in our day. We have 60 seconds in a minute. We have 60 minutes in an hour. We have 24 hours in a day. We have 7 days in a week. We have so many days in a month. The moon cycle, the tide cycle, the cycle of our breath, the cycle of our heartbeat, the cycle of our digestion. And if I had to be responsible for any of those things, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be standing here because I can't be responsible for everything. So life requires it all, but none of us want to feel bad, not for long anyway, and we don't want others to suffer either. And if I'm truthful, sometimes I do, and maybe just a little bit, but most of the time, I don't want others to suffer either. So when bad things happen, we can resist and we wish things are different, or we can choose to try to stand right in the middle of it and see what inquiry shows up and see what information happens for us through that. And working this, as you know, is an inside job. No one can do it for us. And at times, there are not people to do it with us. And that is the way that it is. Some people simply do not have the capacity to hold our concerns in the way that we need them held because they're dealing with their own. Does that make sense? I've learned that the hard way by placing my expectations on others. And so it really is an inside job. Although I will say, from my experience, we are totally blessed to be at the place that we're at with the resources that we have. But here's what you need to know if you're in that situation where another cannot hold your concern to the level you need it held. That reaction with no judgment says everything about their journey and nothing about your journey. Does that make sense? So what another person says everything about them and their place in the world and nothing about you. You are in the position of reflecting to them the difficult, the depressing, the sad, the bad things that none of us want to happen to us. So in effect, the reaction sometimes of the people closest to you is that they will turn away from you for self-preservation. You've probably all had that experience. It's important to know to stay the course. You're all doing that. The other thing that's important to know is this small no, can you go back one? Can you, right there. Is that you won't be moving forward from. You've heard people say this. When are you going to move on? And some people think that means I have to move forward from in terms of closing a door and leaving it behind. But the way I look at it is that we all move forward in times of uncertainty with everything that came before, with everyone that came before, with every happening that came before. Because we're only the people that we are because of those things. So to not move forward with that is really to leave a part of yourself behind, the part of yourself that makes you the individual that you are, and the part of yourself that the universe is requiring of you in this lifetime. That's what I think anyway. So the way I think of completing a cycle is, for me, every cycle for me is really what the heart of growth is all about. But showing up for what is instead of what we want it to be is really hard. It can be really grueling and it can require a lot of letting go. That's what that slide's about. The next one? Yes, this one. A lot in letting go of stories and people and things and circumstances that no longer serve us. And my path has been that there's been a ton of letting go. A lot of people who were in my life 20 years ago simply are not, and more people have come in. Some people are still here. But showing up for what is rather than what we want can also be serving and generative. And the interesting thing about what is it lies in this present moment, which, if you think about it philosophically, is the only place we ever are, is right now, right here in this moment. And I find that quite miraculous. If you think about however many billion people there are on the earth today, at this moment, we are all sitting together in this room. We often bring the past with us, and we're thinking about the past, reflecting on the past while standing in the present. And also we're in the future where our wishes and our hopes and our dreams and our desires lie. So it's very intermingled and entangled. And yet it's been helpful to me to realize that the only place I ever am is right here. And so even intellectually, if I can separate that, that can open a door that's comforting to me. Let's try the next slide and see what shows up. That's a good one. So if you hear nothing else today, I really want you to hear this and take this to heart if you are able to. It's not selfish to be standing in the present and to realize moments of joy in times of uncertainty, regardless of your circumstances. It's not selfish. It's okay to give yourself permission to show up and to feel it all, to let it move through you and to let it guide you, to let it inform you. It's necessary to be connected to the living. It's necessary to be connected to this moment. Whether you want to bring your past with you, which we all need to, and look at your hopes, dreams, and futures for the future. Finding joy in times of uncertainty is a path for the brave and courageous. So welcome, Braveheart. You're in really good company today. From my coaching, I did a 2-year coaching program, which was a very particular kind of coaching. And I loved it because what it tells me and the way that I work is that there's nothing that's broken here. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken. You have everything you need to take one step forward. You may need circumstances to shift and invite you to do so. But when you don't, you can always, in my experience, depend on the university or the university and the universe to help you. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. On Sunday, when I was going, can you try? Let's try. Yeah. On Sunday, when I was going through my introduction, what am I going to say? I received a text from a friend who I think is online with us. And she sent me this picture, which is by, interestingly enough, an artist who's in Ithaca, who's doing an art installation called Intact. And I just found this so, I'm reading the introduction and I'm thinking, am I doing it correctly? Is it going to have meaning? And so I read all of this about interpersonal neurobiology, our brains, that there's this beautiful part of our brain that's not touched by trauma. And that although traumas don't get erased, we can access our core self to be able to hold space for a loving self-image. So I took that as a message that I was on the right track. And also this morning, I received a text from a woman that I worked with years and years and years ago at the veterinary college that I haven't touched bases with for a long time. And her text was about, what did I tell you? It was about feeling rejected. Yeah, the text was about a podcast that was all about feeling rejected, which is a place that happens when you're in the in-between. And I thought, well, it's relevant to something that's going on in my life. I hope it's not relevant to what happens here today. So you can say. So I could tell you the story that happened at CTV this morning, but you all have the same kind of stories. But let's jump in. You're right, there's this morning. So I've had about 10 conversations this morning before I came here, and they were all about navigating the in-between. And I will tell you the CTV story because it's totally relevant. So I went to CTV to get my coffee, and I ran into a woman who I haven't seen, worked with her at Cornell ages ago. And I haven't seen her probably in 10 years. And she had lumberjack boots on, and she had a flannel shirt on. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And she came over and gave me a big hug. After which she told me that a mentor I hadn't known passed away in March, passed away. So we spoke about that for a minute. And then we exchanged emails, and she said, you're a good one in my life, and I really miss talking with you. And I said, me too. And so we're going to keep in touch. And so those are the kind of things that happen every day for all of us. But let's jump in and talk about joy for just a second, and a distinction between joy and happiness, and talk about where joy lives and how to cultivate it. And then I do want to talk a little bit with you about emotions and what we call liminal space, which is the in-between the story that was and the story that's becoming. That sound good? And then we should have about 20 minutes for conversation and questions, which I certainly welcome. Yeah, great. So joy is an emotion, and there's some books that are on your book list. Some of the information I'm going to pull from these two books. This one just came out. These are two people that I worked with in my coach training, and this Field Guide to Emotions is just a book with emotions and with all the information about emotions. It's really brilliant. So joy is an emotion. So what is an emotion? It's energy plus motion, which is a predisposition for action or predisposition for choice, because there can be a choice for no action with an emotion. And this is one interpretation only. The invitation here is to dig into this and then ask yourself, does this have meaning for me? And if it does, grab onto it. And if it doesn't, let it go and figure out what has meaning for you in terms of emotions. Some emotions serve to open us up to others, and some emotions serve to close us down to others. But the purpose of emotions is that every emotion tends to a specific human need. And learning about emotions versus experiencing emotions is a very different exercise. So if you are here or online with us and you are suffering the acute phases or experiencing the acute phase of grief for however long that is for you particularly, there is nothing that I'm going to be able to say today that you may find helpful, and here's why. When you are in the acute phase of grief, we want to give an intellectual explanation for an emotional experience, and the two do not track. Does that make sense? When you are experiencing the acute phase of grief and grief over time, your brain is not online correctly, especially when you're in the acute phase of grief. Most of your brain is shut down. You're back in the reptilian part of your brain, which is the fight or flight or freeze, or now we know there's a fourth called tend and befriend. That's super interesting to learn about. But your brain is foggy. Your body's shut down. And so with our open hearts, we say really incorrect things to people that are grieving because that's what we've learned. We've learned that we don't want to see people suffering, and so we want to say something to fix it. But you know as well as I do that the intellectual response does nothing to nurture the emotional experience that you're having. And so digging into emotions can be super helpful. So let's just walk through three and talk about distinctions that may be helpful. So joy is a present time emotion. Joy happens in the moment, according to this interpretation, for your consideration. Joy happens in the moment. Joy is fleeting. Joy is when someone usually crosses the finish line, gets the appointment, hears they get the job. Joy is momentary. It says life is worth celebrating. This thing is worth celebrating. The purpose of it is to show us that we have reason to celebrate, and how it moves us, how it opens us to other people is that we feel like celebrating and sharing our joy. Happiness is similar to joy, but there's a minor distinction. Happiness opens us to others. Happiness says, I really like how life is turning out. So already we can see the difference in terms of graduation. I thought that was appropriate given what's coming at Cornell. But joy would be the momentary, I have my degree, that moment of throwing the cap in the air, where happiness is, oh, my grandfather and I are graduating at the same time. Like, look how life turned out. This is pretty amazing, and I'm going to enjoy it for the duration. It's tied to people, places, and things, whereas joy comes from within. So that's a distinction that if you wonder, am I experiencing joy or am I experiencing happiness? Is it tied to an external people, place, or thing, or is it something that comes from the inside out? Sustained belief that things are turning out well. It shows us what our idea of a good life looks like. And how it moves us is we really would just like things to continue as they are, because who doesn't want to be happy? So happiness, long, like how life's turning out, moments of joy within happiness. And then there's contentment, which is a little bit different altogether. It is also a present orientation. So joy, happiness, contentment, just like gratitude and love, lots of emotions are present moment. And the story of contentment is, I don't really need to change any of my circumstances. So this is the person that's sitting on the porch at the end of a long day, working in the fields where the fields are planted and the sun is going down and the porch swing is rocking and the cup of wine or coffee, whatever they're drinking, is in their hand. And they're looking out over their life thinking, wow, this is the moment, this moment. I don't want to change anything about it. Does that make sense? Different than happiness, different than joy. It lives alongside rest and enjoyment, and it lets us know that we've done enough. This is an important distinction. If you're navigating the in-between with a sense of responsibility for family commitments, anything like that. So contentment helps us let go of trying to improve or change things. So everything is as it should be. I can't do any more. I'm not going to do any more. I don't need to change anything about my circumstances. So these are 3 present moment emotions. There are also some others: gratitude, love, wonder, trust, faith, hope, peace, and optimism. Back one, please. And perseverance. Perseverance is, according to this interpretation, is a tricky emotion because it kind of can live everywhere, but I wanted to put that in there because I know your pain. I don't know your circumstances, but I know your pain, and I know some of you, you are persevering to, like, you're in it. Next one. So here are some emotions that close us to others. And again, it's one interpretation. So fear is really interesting. Fear is has a future orientation, but you can feel it in the present moment. So fear closes us to others, and it says there's something in the future that I know is going to harm me. I don't like to fly. So I will have a sense of fear when I go to the airport, because if I get in the plane, there's a chance, right? So that's my sense of fear. I was in Toronto once. Some of you may have been there. There's a building that has a glass floor, maybe 80 stories high. I don't recommend this either. But this was probably 15 years ago, and I stood there for the better part of an hour watching little children run out onto that glass that was 80, and I couldn't make my leg move. I couldn't walk out because intellectually my brain was in the place of fear. It helps us. Fear is really important for us because it helps us choose safety over risk. And there's not a right or wrong or a good or bad or a better or worse here. There's simply a choice. But fear says, all right, you have to look. And is it safer or is it riskier to do this? And then it helps us choose. How it moves us is that we run away or freeze in the face of danger. Sadness is a beautiful emotion, unless you're in it. I get that. But sadness is a beautiful emotion. It does have a past orientation. So while fear says there's something in the future that's likely to hurt me, sadness says I have lost something that I care about. So I'm currently sad about that. Sad about what? Sad because things are not the same. Sad because things have changed. Sad because I want things different, better, or more, which is also where unresolved grief lies, in that space of wanting different, better, or more. So when my dad was in hospice, so I was tending to my dad in hospice, and knowing that I had lost the past, and I also knew that I was losing currently what I thought I could have had in the future, the possibility of what might have been. So while sadness is you can have a past orientation, you can be feeling it in the present. Does that make sense? But what's beautiful about sadness is it shows us what's important to us. If it wasn't important to you, you would be in a different emotion about it, or be in the emotion of indifference about it. So getting in touch with our sadness can help us intellectually realize what's important to us. But the feeling of sadness is an emotional experience. So it takes both. And how sadness moves us is we would like to be alone. And those of you who are parents probably have run across many of these emotions with a small child or a growing child. I work with your children at Cornell. When people ask me what I do, I give them my job title, which I can actually give you an introduction in a little bit, but I give them my job title and tell them what I do, tell them what I get paid for. And then as I said to parents this weekend at the entrepreneurship celebration, this is what I get paid for. And what I do at Cornell is I love your children. That's what I do, but you don't say that often in academia. But that's what I do. And so how painful is it as a parent to see your child right in the throes of sadness, and all you want to do is talk to them and explain and hold them and hug them, and they just really want to go be alone. So knowing the distinctions of some of these emotions can be very healthy and helpful. So sadness shows us what's important to us. It moves us in terms of us wanting to have spaciousness and be alone. And the impact of sadness is it helps us grieve, and it helps us come to terms with what I call the accurate assessment of the current situation. Like, what is real for me today? What's really accurate? Guilt is a really interesting emotion. It has a past orientation. We could talk for days about guilt and shame, but guilt really has to do with my own personal standards. And I've experienced this a good bit with healthcare situations, and probably some of you are touching that, or maybe not. If you're not, please don't let me influence you to go there. But this is an emotion that comes from within. And the idea is, in doing that or choosing that, I've broken my own standards. I've broken what I expect of myself. I've broken what I want of myself. Guilt is a very harsh emotion because it gets mixed up with responsibility and accountability, and because it's from the inside out, it can really close us off to others. But the purpose of it is super interesting because it helps us take care of our personal identity. It can help us draw a line in certain situations. I'm going to cross the line. I'm not going to cross the line. So it brings things to light in a way that other emotions perhaps wouldn't bring things to light. How it moves us, though, is it does open up the door for us to be in the spiral of self-punishment, which is not productive. But until you know these distinctions, it's easy to get in this spiral. And once you know these distinctions, you can shift out of emotion. What do I mean by that? So if you're in the emotion of fear, the antidote for fear is courage or bravery. So if you're in the emotion of fear, or if you're working with someone that's in the emotion of fear, it won't take you out of the fear, but it will start to be an antidote to do something that's courageous, to take one step forward for what you can do. And in some instances, when you're in the emotion of fear, you're right in the headlights and you can't do anything. And yet one thing is something, and one step forward can help you shift out of fear. Does that make sense? So with all of these emotions, you can see where the only place we ever are is in the present. Would you agree with that? Like, we're here right now in this moment. And now we're here right now in this moment. That moment is in the past, and yet we carry it with us. So we're only ever in the present, but we are made up of our historical discourse, our cultural discourse, the things that have happened to us and through us in life. We bring all of that with us to the current moment. And then we're also focused on a goal. We're focused on the future. We're focused on the what ifs. We're focused on our hopes, dreams, and desires. And we bring those with us. And there's tons of emotions that we can be experiencing at the same time. Some of them have a current orientation, usually the ones that, if you think of a pendulum and you swing over to the right side of the pendulum, the happiness and the bliss and the love and the good emotions, those are all present moment emotions. And usually when we think about shifting the pendulum to the other side, these are the emotions that we don't want, what we would consider the bad emotions. And yet they're all super important to tell us who we are, and why we're doing what we're doing. Make sense? So that's just a little bit about emotions. So we know that joy lives in the present moment, and it's in this interpretation, joy is a momentary blip. And well, I will give you permission to feel joy despite uncertainty. It will come and it will go. But what is uncertainty, and where does it live? Uncertainty arises because we're in between stories, and I suspect this is where we all are, always, even in the present moment. We're always in between stories. The story that happened yesterday and the story that's going to arrive tomorrow. The old story is gone, and the new story has not yet emerged. This space is, in my world, is termed liminal space. You've heard of this term before, liminal space? It's a term that emerges out of an anthropological study of rituals that mark a person's transition. So if you think about someone going on what do they call them? A vision quest? A vision quest. Or a ritual that signifies a real transition in life. This is liminal space, the space between stories, I think. Have any of you walked a labyrinth before? You know what yes, okay. So a labyrinth is a physical manifestation of liminal space. The liminal space is in the middle of the labyrinth. So there's a releasing when you go into the labyrinth, there's a receiving in the liminal space in the middle, and there's a returning when you come out of the labyrinth. Hero's journey, have you heard of that journey? You know The Wizard of Oz? So any movie, Wonder Woman, Wizard of Oz, Superman, any movie like that, any movie actually that has a plot, is really a version of the hero story. There's some calling. Somebody's been called to do something. Then they accept the call and they go out. They're on the call. And they usually meet other people during the call that they work through great difficulty with. And then they come around to some resolution of the call. And then they usually return with some message. So when you think through The Wizard of Oz, it's a perfect hero's journey. We're all on our own hero's journey all the time. So the limen is the empty space. And this is usually the metaphor we use to share with people when we talk about liminal space, because everybody understands that story A is the caterpillar, and then they go into liminal space, and then story B is the beautiful butterfly. So this is a beautiful metaphor to talk about what liminal space is, but this is a linear, sequential, beautiful metaphor that when it works out, as it should in right timing, results in a butterfly, but life is way messier than that. So while it's good to keep this in mind, we're all often in the trenches. It is a real place of unknowing. It's a real place of unsettling. It's a place where we simply don't know what's coming around the corner. And that can be it can knock us off kilter. It's also wondering, wishing, fantasizing about things in the past, the way that good old days, the way that things used to be. And, you know, we convince ourselves that things were simpler back then, things were better back then. Wasn't I happier back then? Can't I go and reclaim what was? But as we know, time marches on. So things move forward, and so liminal space, it's not aging with dementia, for example, there's a diminished capacity and less freedom. So that's not all that happy a situation. And we really don't know what's going to happen at the other side. When a family member has gone missing or someone we love is incarcerated, we just don't know that a happy ending is going to be possible. We're in a liminal space. There's the story that was, and there's the story that's coming. But in this interim, in this middle, can be a long, excruciating, painful liminal space. When a refugee leaves a homeland, for example, when a child gets into a college, you know, there are some things that kind of get mixed up because, oh, my child got into college. That's a happy, wonderful time. I'm getting married. That's a happy, wonderful time. I'm going to have a child. That seems to be a happy, wonderful time. And yet, when you look at it, the story in between, there's lots of letting go and lots of releasing, and lots of things are never going to be the same, even then. So it all gets nonlinear. So it's about letting go of the outcome, showing up even when life is messy. But here's some things to keep in mind. So we just kind of talked about ambiguous loss. Yep. So here's some things to keep in mind. The invitation really is to try and resist running away from the uncertainty. And I know that's so hard, but I can almost guarantee you, and you've probably had the experience, that it's going to be waiting for you outside the door anyway. And the universe is really generous to us like this over time. If we have something that we're not ready, willing, or able to confront and to learn from and transform through, I almost guarantee you that at some point down the line, another situation will come up where the universe will say, hey, here's another opportunity for you to see if you're ready, willing, and able to go right through the middle instead of the around the outside, and let's take care of this. And then another thing will show up. Does that make sense? We have these patterns in our lives of things that we simply may not be, all three, ready, willing, and able. We were talking about one today. I'm ready and I'm able, but I'm just not willing. And I get that. But when you understand that successful transitions do really require all three, you can let the pressure release valve off, and you can be gentle with yourself, and you can look at the situation and say, am I ready? Am I ready? And that's the whole plant, right? The plant going up to the blooming stage. Am I ready for that? Because I could be willing. I want to do it. I've paid the money. I'm going to the seminar, and I could be able. I found someone to take care of my dog. The gas is in my car, but I get in my car and I get to the end of my drive and I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I'm going back home. That's too difficult. I could be ready. It could be right timing, and I could be willing, but I simply don't have the resources. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. I have a job. It's not going to work out. So if you can examine something from a readiness, a willingness, and an ability standpoint, you really can be gentle with yourself, take some of the pressure off, and sometimes you can resist the running away from uncertainty. So give yourself permission to experience momentary joy, and you've all heard the fake it till you make it. Just give it a try. The idea is to be gentle with yourself and try to be non-judgmental and realize that we're all walking this same path. You don't need to get it right. The invitation is to try. Know what gives you joy. This is a really hard one, especially when you're in liminal space and the in-between and you're in the trenches. To even sometimes touch that momentary joy is really hard, but it can help to remember the last time you've experienced joy. I usually carry this little stone in my pocket, which is in the shape of a heart. And when I got this, it just was a lovely memory. And whether or not I can access that memory when I pull this stone out of my pocket, the stone is still in my pocket, waiting for me when I'm ready, willing, and able to pull it out. If you have a reminder of joy, like this stone, sometimes it can help just to keep it nearby, put it on the counter in your house, put something on the refrigerator, put something in your car, in your pocketbook, in your bag. A reminder of joy, a word, can be really helpful. And look at it often. It can be a reminder that, I am in this cyclical, co-creative, generative, harmonic impulse of the universe, even though it doesn't feel like it, and I will laugh again. Challenge the belief that it's wrong to experience joy amidst uncertainty. You're worth that. Belief systems are developed in us by the time, if you believe Bruce Lipton, he's an epigenetics guy, wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. It's a beautiful book. There's a lot of science around belief systems being solid in us by the age of 7. And so sometimes it's worth challenging the belief system that we have, talking it through with a trusted friend. I think I believe this, I'm not sure, this is the accurate assessment. And they may be able to point out, are you sure you don't believe this? And then challenge it, because there's joy available and you're certainly worth it. Adopt a beginner mindset. We're all beginners. And once we give ourselves permission to be gentle with ourselves, things can look very different. We can see things through different eyes. Try to make meaning through the situation. So, right, the example that people usually give is Viktor Frankl. his book is Man's Search for Meaning. And his idea is those people who can find meaning in hardships have the greatest ability to survive and thrive through it. Connect with nature. There's a resource list, and I sent, I was asked, send us resources. And so I sent a whole, you may have seen it already, but it'll be out if you haven't. The top of the resource list, I sent an email, said that here are the best resources I can give you. Cornell Botanic Gardens, the water, the moon, the grass, gardening. And I know what they were asking for were books and videos and lists. But again, that's the intellectual answer for the emotional experience. There is nothing better than going and standing and putting your arms against a tree and your feet in the ground and having a conversation. It's just the way that it is. So those are the best resources I can give you. And we are in a beautiful area for that. It will remind you that you are connected to the living and life. Try a mindful practice as a way of being present and letting go of the outcome. Listen, that can be, I'm not suggesting that you sit and chant and play music and om all day. That's not what I'm suggesting, although that's certainly an option. A mindful practice can be the way you make coffee every morning. A mindful practice can be when the alarm goes off, you get up, you go to the restroom, you go to the kitchen, you take your shower. That repetitive, comforting, cyclical practice that we all have. The way you drove here today, the way you'll drive back if you're driving in a car, the bus route you'll take, the repetitive, consistent, grounding practices. And then there's journaling and art and music and all of those things. But mindful practices can be really, really helpful. And keep showing up, even if you have to go it alone. We kind of talked about that. Here's one that we hear all the time and none of us do it. Practice self-care. Really, really practice self-care. And I'm going to make it really easy for you. Just do these 3 things. Get enough sleep, drink clean water, and eat nurturing food. Like, if you can only do those things, and try. If you do that 1 day a week, that's great. You may be able to do it 2 days a week. And watch others laughing. Stay off social media. That would be my suggestion completely, because it's not realistic anyway, and then you'll just start measuring your life against somebody else's, and that's not going to be helpful. But you know what? Laugh in. That was a great show. I Love Lucy. That's a great show. The Carol Burnett Show. There's comedians online. There's all kinds of people watch all kinds of cat videos on YouTube, like these. But there are things available to, even if you can't get into them and experience joy, they're a good reminder that it is waiting for you right outside the door when you're ready, willing, and able. And that might not be anytime soon, but it's a good reminder for your brain. And it's all far from a perfect science. So I'm going to take a risk. When I sent this deck in, they were like, what is this last slide? This doesn't seem appropriate. But I'm going to take a risk, and I'm going to show you my most recent fail. You'll see why right here. So remember the woman I was telling you about with the kennel at the beginning of this story, that I stayed in my camper for a year with my dogs? Whole story there, by the way. So her name's Terry, and she lives in Massachusetts, and met her online, and we are now fast friends. Last October, I took my dog. I have Greater Swiss Mountain dogs. I have dog friends all over the place. So I took my dog to an event, and because it was October, they had a photographer at the event. So we were taking Halloween pictures. And so I thought, I'm going to take this Halloween picture. And I was in Massachusetts, which is where she lives. So somehow the universe connected that for me. And before I could think it through, I sent her the text of my dog because I thought she would like the picture. And the second I sent the text to her, I remembered, her son Steven passed away 2.5 weeks ago from an overdose. And I looked at the picture and I thought, yeah, that was a miss. That was a big miss. And so it took me a while, 15 minutes or so, to pick up the phone, but I picked up the phone and I called her. And as soon as she answered the phone, she was laughing a way that I've never heard her laugh before. And she said, I've been standing here waiting for my phone to ring because I know you. And I know as soon as you sent this picture, what you were going to think. And she said, I also know your heart. And I knew the intention was pure, but she said, I just have to thank you because you broke, like the past 2.5 weeks have been horrible. And you allowed me the opportunity to laugh. And to be quite honest, that was not my intent, but that it turned out that way was beautiful. So, we're not going to get it right, but as long as we come from a place of the heart, it can never be wrong. It can't be incorrect. So, none of us are perfect, and we're just trying to get by, and joy will be there when you're ready. We've talked a little bit about the emotion of joy, some other emotions, what liminal space and the in-between really is all about. I gave you a thrilling introduction of a little bit about my life. You know, while all that's been happening, I've been blessed to be at Cornell and elsewhere for a number of years. And as you kind of heard, I work with your children through this amazing program. But really, I have an awesome opportunity to work with a small group of children for a whole semester. And I see each one of these students for an hour a week over the semester for coaching sessions. And so it's called the Kessler Fellows Program, in engineering. And that's just been a remarkable journey for me, and to understand the mindsets and the struggles and the concerns of this post-millennial group that we're all involved in. So I was hoping to leave time for questions, which I think we have, or conversation. If anybody wants to jump in and ask or share, happy to engage, either here or later. I don't know everything, but I'm happy to share what I do know or what I have experienced. So what you got? What are you curious about?
So I think what you're doing is awesome. And it's a goal of mine to maybe one day be able to offer what you're offering. How did you find yourself on this journey of being able to speak and offer that other joy, that happiness? I love to spread joy and kindness. What I live to do. Is my dream is to be you one day. How do you get there?
So it's a beautiful question you're asking, because it was not easy. And I'll give you the bottom line. So in the past 10 years since I came back from my little journey, I've studied shamanism. I've studied tuning forks. I did the 2-year coaching program. I've studied the emotional thing. I've done lots of online course, like all of these things. And what I was trying to do was to find the thing, because I knew that I liked to speak, but I was trying to find the thing instead of allowing life to happen and the thing to emerge through me. And so once I stopped forcing it and realized that for me, the most important thing is authenticity, then I had to get in touch with my authentic self. And that took a ton of work, because that's just not a happy story. It's just, my life is not a happy story. I've, for the past 10 years, have been unraveling the 45 years before and understanding it and letting go and receiving. But for me, it seemed disingenuine and unauthentic to put an offer out into the universe and charge people for it when I didn't really know what I was talking about. And so I had to let go of that. And then I just had to let my life story emerge. And once I claimed that, I was letting that happen, the universe conspired to my success. And I believe the same will happen for everybody. But that moment, that tipping point, that what is required to do that is probably the bravest thing I've ever done. And I've done some pretty hard things. To just be raw and say, what is trying to happen through me, instead of continually saying, why is this happening to me? There's a purpose for that. And that's not incorrect for a time in life. Why is this happening to me? But as soon as I shifted that to what's trying to show up through me, the doors just started open. And I don't know that it's right, but it is correct. It feels correct for me. Does that make sense? So a lot of it is, and that's why, I've this whole claim your conversation. So what I'm working on, what I think my thing is, I'll just say it because the first time I said it out loud, is really about claim your conversation, but more importantly, break the cycle, heal the wound, and live the life you want. Here's the clincher, within the one you have. That's what's been important for me, because we all want to change our lives, but for me, when I stopped trying to change my life based on a measure of what I was seeing a successful life for someone else, and I said, you know what, I have this one wild life. What do I want to do with it? Thanks to Mary Oliver. Can I create what I want within this life? Because I'm not changing my 57 years of circumstances. It's just not possible. So I had to untangle that, embrace that, look at that, and say, what is it I'm here to do and to talk about? And I think that's the thing. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yeah. If you're curious about anything in life, to my mind, that's the inroad for exploration. There's something there to explore if you're curious. And next time I'll be sitting there and you'll be up there. Yeah. And you put the offer out, and here's the, other people can't hold your concern. Like sometimes you put the offer out, you must be ready for total rejection. But you're putting the offer out. And so the way I look at that is, I'm going to put it out. And if the universe conspires to my success, then it's correct for me. I'm not talking about right or wrong or good or bad. It's correct. If I'm forcing too hard, for me, it's incorrect. And there's something to look at. So I can be right or wrong, both while something's correct and both while something's incorrect. But for me, that's a cleaner way to talk about it. So if I'm fighting something, then it's just not correct. I'm spinning my wheels, I'm wasting my time. So I shift one little thing, and then the next thing you know, I walk out and there's a poster in the hallway. Oh, that's exactly what I needed to know, or exactly the person I needed to meet. Make sense? What you got?
But he doesn't really understand that concept, so it's out. What advice do you give? I guess it's similar as a parent. Like, what do you suggest to people who are just trying to help or just want to make it easier? Like, are there things that work or things that?
Yeah. So let me repeat the question just in case you all didn't hear it. Hi, for those of you that are still here. I'll paraphrase. When I'm in sadness, and can I just use when I'm in sadness and my husband doesn't understand and he won't, he doesn't want me to be alone, like what would I recommend? And so for me, these are difficult conversations. These are the courageous conversations of life. And sometimes it's difficult to have them so in your instance, I'm totally in sadness. I just want to be left alone. I just can't. The yes and conversation is really helpful. I feel, or yes, I hear what you're saying. I know you don't want me to be alone, and I'm so touched that you care for me that deeply. And it reminds me that for me to be present in this conversation, I need to practice self-care. These are hard conversations. But that the conversation may be coming is an inroad to journaling. I work with students on this all the time that don't have an internship for the summer. And I know they're going home for Thanksgiving. And so the question is, what's the first thing your parent's going to say to you? What are you doing for the summer? So let's practice the answer to that question. Similar, same. So if you can stand in the present and believe you see what's coming in the future, what might the response from someone who's on my side and love me be when I'm in the throes of sadness and I just want to be alone? They're going to want to be by my side. So what might I say? And to kind of front end, it could be really helpful. But certainly, acknowledging that care and concern is super helpful, and loving relationship, you want to definitely acknowledge that. And also, I need to practice self-care. Helpful? Yeah. What else? We have 5 minutes. Anything online? Anybody have a question online? I know most of my friends that were on were like, I gotta leave at 12:30. So there's probably anything else? Yes.
My friend is going through a divorce.
Yes.
You mentioned the intellectual response versus the emotional response. I want to tell her it will be okay. You can do this. You got a lot of support. But I'm not sure I'm.
Yeah, so we can never be sure. This is key. This is a beautiful question. So a friend who's going through a divorce, and I'm a friend who's going through a divorce, and I want to give I want to fix it. I want to help, and I want to fix it. And that for me is an intellectual response. And so the curiosity about my conversation about an intellectual response is not equal to an emotional experience. That's genius, right? I thought about that at 3 o'clock one morning. I wrote it on a piece of paper. Not my thought, but certainly showed up that way. So it's hard. This is hard because a person who is suffering reminds us of what? Suffering. And if we're not suffering now, we know it's coming because we're in this repetitive cycle. And it's really hard to sit with somebody in their suffering, to watch the slobbering, painful, guttural screaming, or the throwing, and yet when we have the experience or are brave to try at least to sit with an emotion in the present, to sit with it for as long as it takes, what ends up happening is we have a physical reaction to an emotional experience. All kinds of things happen. And then eventually you've probably all experienced this or seen it. There's okay, there's that. And that comes through the experience of letting this wash over you, wash through you, and not be afraid that and I'll say it this way, it might not be the correct way to say it, but not be afraid that it's going to kill you. Because while experiencing those painful emotions around a divorce, which has everything to do with what happened in the past and my hope for the future, that is a horrible circumstance. But just creating the conditions where you're sitting with the person for as long as it takes or as long as you're able to give. And you have to give yourself a break for that, right? Because you may not be able to give the person exactly what they need, but anything is better than nothing, than turning away from a person that's in pain. So, you know what? Here's what I would say. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what it is to be you, but can I just sit here with you for a bit? Can I just... So I want to, so I want to say it's all going to be okay because I think it's going to be okay, but I don't really know. There's nothing, you can't go wrong. Really, truly, trust me with this. You can't go wrong if it comes from the heart. You can't. And those of you that have been on the receiving end, as long as you're aware of as long as you're not trying to fix it, right? Well, you got to get a lawyer straight, you know, all those kind of things. That's not helpful. Unless that's, yeah. Yes. And if you only can take a momentary breath and realize, all right, what do I want to say intellectually? You can still say it, right? I'm your friend. I love you. It's hard to see you in pain, so I want to fix this. And I have lots of ideas when you're ready, willing, and able. Here's another thing that's not helpful. Then to say, what can I do for you? Same with somebody who has a loved one or not so loved one that's passed away, somebody that's passed away. One of the, like what we want to say is, how can I help? What can I do? And what that does is puts the burden on a person whose brain is not functioning correctly. They're foggy. I see lots of people shaking their heads. So we say lots of things because we can only live life from the inside out. That's all we can do. So we're speaking from our circumstance, right? So what we want to do says everything about us and nothing about them. So even a momentary break to say, okay, I just need to. I was working with a man once and he lost a son and farmer. Shared a beautiful story. The bottom line is this. He said, the only thing that was helpful to me was the neighbor that put the can of coffee on my doorstep and said, you're going to need this over the next 3 weeks. That was the most helpful thing. Now, what is that? A can of coffee, right?
So it didn't require him asking for anything.
He just put the can of coffee, right. So there was no, but here's what I find laughable. And then I'll end here because there's another question. But here's what I find laughable. When people say, you know, I'm here for you. I just want to say, where are you really? At the end of the day, when you go home to your life, like, where are you really? Because you're not here. So I get it. I'm here for you. But really, what now? So I find that really interesting, right? Because I want to be here for you. But really, you're not going to call me at midnight when you're awake and you can't sleep because you know I have a husband and kid or whatever that is. So to the extent you're able, you choose. You just show up. You leave something on the doorstep. You send a card. You make a call. You're making the action, and then it's up to the other person to accept or decline. And again, you need to be ready for the decline. It says nothing about you. It says everything about them. Make sense? Helpful? Okay. Yes. Oh, and online. And it's 1 o'clock. I just want to keep you on track. I'm happy to stay as long. Yeah, so these emotions are a slippery slope. And it's such a key question because the realization and the question, the answer is already in there. So for you, if you're wondering that, then there is the likelihood that this simple intellectual response is insufficient to what you're going through. Does that make sense? So I can't live your life from the inside out, and yet I can say you have everything you need, intuition included. Intuition included. Yeah. And at Cornell, there are tons of resources, tons of people. Absolutely. Yes. 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 Please.
My spouse is a company, and can you share about that? I feel like you usually get 1 or 2 reactions. Know and love somebody and understand, or you get people like friends, or like, well, how would you love somebody? But I found a place called Al-Anon. And the beauty of Al-Anon is that it's a room full of people that are not offering advice. They are offering their situation and what they've gotten through that situation, what they've gotten into that situation, but think they're just listening. And in a moment where my significant other may have relapsed and nobody just to be there. And so I think just to touch on, there really was nothing that there was nothing that anybody can say, but just to have a room full of people that can understand and are willing to listen to me talk about loving somebody who's treated poorly was enough to get through those things. So just being there is
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. There's so much wisdom here within each one of you based on your lived experience. There's nothing I'm telling you that you don't already know. This is just a beautiful reminder of that you have everything you need to move forward. So I will say there are lots of things like that and places to go and people to be with. And if you've had the experience of going somewhere where you walk into a room and there's no explanation necessary, like Al-Anon, like a seminar that you sign up for, like this today, we didn't have to go around the room and say, what's your name and why are you here? And what, like there's a general idea of the curiosity. Of course, it's a story I'm making up in my head, but I suspect there's a general idea of the reasons that you came today. Isolation and sadness, what I will say, are not the same thing. So if you see yourself having a pattern of behavior over time that just doesn't track, or if you see someone doing that, Cornell is the see something, say something. The caring community for sure, and we're really blessed like that sometimes, even though someone can't hold our concern like we need it held, they're courageous enough to say something. Yeah. So I'm happy to stay. I just want to take a moment to really express my gratitude because every time I say something, it's helpful for me to hear it. I think that brain is a lovely organ in that it wants to be witnessed all the time. So by writing or speaking is really helpful to keep things straight. So I love to hear myself talk for that reason alone, so I can let my brain relax and let some things go. So thank you for showing up. I hope you found something meaningful and valuable for you. If you want to talk further, if you have questions, I'm happy to stay. I'm happy to. Cornell is, I feel very safe at Cornell. It was a very important part of my journey to land at Cornell, and it's probably why I've stayed for so long. It's the safest place on the planet for me. So I'm indebted to Cornell. So if there's ever anything I can do, I love it here, and I love people that are here. So thank you very, very much.